welcome to the Finance Hour. I'm your host, Wayne Randall. My next guest is a remarkable gentleman that's achieved unprecedented success as a community advocate, entrepreneur, family man. But what's most striking about his story is what he's had to overcome to achieve the heights of success. He's currently working on his doctorate degree, and he's one of the highest gross owners in a McDonald's franchise with over 100 stores. Without further ado, please let me welcome the man himself and mayoral candidate for Baltimore City, Mr. Rikki Vaughn. How you doing this afternoon, Rikki?
I'm doing well, Mr. Wayne. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
Oh, Rikki, it's more than a pleasure of having you and actually getting a chance to meet you again. You know, it's a pleasure. You know, Rikki, you have so many accomplishments, but what I want to do is I kind of just want to slow it down a little bit. And then people are going to find out all they need to find out about you within the spirit of time. But would you just share a little bit of your humble beginnings with me and the general public so they can get a grasp, a sense of who is Rikki Vaughn?
Absolutely. Rikki Vaughn is just Baltimore native, proudly born and raised in East Baltimore, and then I relocated to West Baltimore as I got older. I always say that I'm a product and a son of Baltimore. I was this individual that at a young age I dropped out of high school. I became a teen parent. I became a teen husband. I became homeless, and I was this minimum wage worker at McDonald's. So that's really the foundation of how I got started, and really I would say what empowered me or motivated me to want to achieve more and want to also give back to the community that supported me in going back, from dropping out of high school to get my GED and going on to college and my MBA and law school and now doctorate, motivated me to become a homeowner and motivated me to go from that minimum wage worker at McDonald's to a CEO and president of a variety of QSR chains, national brands, and independent stores as well.
Rikki, I'm telling you, if anybody hears that, and I'm sure they have their ear gates open, they should definitely be inspired by all of that. I mean, I'm inspired by it myself. It's quite a feat. I mean, some people are doing merely a fraction of that, and they just find that cumbersome. But to
I appreciate
achieve all those things, and you're still moving at light speed, But let me say this much, and I know a lot of people want to know about it. As mayor of the city, with a budget of $3.5 billion and $2.9 billion in operating expenses, how would you allocate those kind of funds in the areas of economic development, education, public safety, and housing for the communities, Rikki?
Absolutely, good question. The first thing from a business perspective is you have to understand where your revenue is coming from. You also have to understand where your revenue is at. The first thing I would do is make sure that we open up the books for auditing. For too long, we have had funds that have been secretly misplaced or disappeared. So I would first audit all of the financials of the city of Baltimore, make it public for the residents of Baltimore, being that it's their dollars. The allocation, the other thing I'll tie into that is that Baltimore is predominantly 67% African American, but yet we only have 10 to 15% contracts within the city of Baltimore. So largely a gap in between black entrepreneurs and black businesses given the opportunity to reinvest in the city of Baltimore. When you look at from allocating funds, we can talk about education, which is very important. We can talk about crime, which of course is just as equally important, and we can talk about economic development. But what we tend to see is many individuals look at it independently, and we have to take a more holistic approach on how we allocate funds, because we have to understand that one cannot be fixed without the other.
Yes,
I would
correct.
look at not only how do we reallocate funds, but I will also look at how we're spending current funds in each agency that we have within the city. We're hearing about this overtime with the Baltimore City Police. We're hearing about the mismanaged funds that just came out, I believe, yesterday with DPW. So that'll be the first place that we start. But we have to make sure that we have a very transparent government, and we also have to make sure that we have our citizens and our residents of Baltimore involved and included on the decision making, especially when it comes to how funds are being spent in Baltimore City.
Yes, yes. I definitely attest to that. I'm sure you agree with the fact of these town hall meetings where people can get an up close view and be actually able to talk to people like yourself and other candidates and get their questions heard, get their views heard, and get some answers to their questions because sure, it's a lot going on. I mean, I hear they always often talk about this. It's a city in crisis, but I like to say it's a city in transition. It's going to
Yeah,
take somebody with a vision to come in here, and as you say, there's it's not a problem about money. It's how the money is being managed. It's just appalling. I mean, it's an issue now on the table about an incident that happened, and they brought up this thing that's called the descent decree. And I think I remember you and I talked about it some time back, a couple of weeks ago. But it shouldn't be just wiped off the books. But when you spoke about it being amended, can you give us a little insight on what you would like to possibly see done if it were amended, and how could that be done, and how could it be implemented to make a change?
absolutely. And if I can chime in on previous prior to going into that,
Mm-hmm.
we hear a lot of talk, and that's what we hear with our, and not all. I'm not one of those candidates that's going to get out there and trying to bash all candidates and all elected
Mm-hmm.
officials. But we hear a lot of talk, and we don't see the action. Or we see action when it's time for reelection, but
Yeah.
not throughout the term of their office.
Yeah. I
So
understand.
the other part about that is we got to make sure that we have, for lack of words, we have made government too complicated. We have meetings about city funds and city budgets when folks are at work at 9 o'clock in the morning. So how can they get feedback? How can they sit in and listen and share ideas and best practices on how we can recover in our city if we're keeping them out of the loop? And I believe part of that, the reason why we have certain hearings with certain committees, whether it's at 9 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock in the morning, because we do a disservice, or we're trying to do a disservice to the constituents, so they're not able to kind of track our movement and our
Right.
action.
And participate. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when you talk about the consent decree, I am one of the candidates that are, I'm very outspoken. I'm not saying that I agree fully or disagree with the consent decree. I'm saying that it needs to be amended. We have, and folks, one thing I would encourage, whether it's voters, whether it's candidates, or whether it's elected officials, to get a copy of the consent decree, get a copy of the city charter, get copies of these documents and read through the documents. Don't go off of sound bites of what certain folks choose to take out of that and list on social media or share on social media.
Sure.
The consent decree, the reason why, I believe fully that it needs to be amended is because what the consent decree does, in my view, in my opinion, after reading through it, is it ties the hands of officers, good officers, that want to serve and do right by their constituents and who they're sworn in to serve and protect. But it gives a pass on those other officers that have already violated our rights and continue to violate our rights. But what happens is they're kind of sitting on the back end of it, still getting paid by the same folks that they violated to still have a badge and a gun. So we haven't addressed the issue. We put a Band-Aid on the issue, and we put a Band-Aid on the issue at taxpayers' expense. So I would amend it I would get those officers that violated rights, that should never have been given a badge and a weapon. I would get them off of the force. I would file charges, and I would get them in prison and bars and behind bars where they belong and they deserve to be. As a business owner, or any business owner, the first thing when you get into business you want to do, or in my shoes, I can only speak for me, I want to do three things. One, I want to make money. You know, you don't open up a business and say, yeah, I don't want to make any money. But one of the key things that I do as a business owner is I want to make sure that I'm able to take care of my employees from a safety standpoint and a financial standpoint. And then the third thing is I want to make sure I'm able to protect my investment. So if I have a business, you know, some of the businesses throughout, you know, Baltimore is KFC. So if I have a KFC restaurant and I have individuals outside of my restaurant selling drugs, and I have customers afraid to get out of their cars and patronize and go in and support, and I have a consent decree in place that prohibits the police from engaging in that activity, then how do we expect to recover or transition in a city like Baltimore? Not only does it impact us from a community standpoint, but every business, you know, every government, whether it's Detroit, Baltimore, New York, it's a business. Government is a business. When you got revenue coming in and revenue going out, it's a business. So not only does it impact the communities that we serve and that we live in, but it also impacts tourists coming to our city and to our state because they feel as though they're unsafe. So we have to do a better job when we're proposing legislation, when we're writing laws, when we're doing the research behind it, and we have to do a better job as candidates and as elected officials on making sure we get this information out to the constituents and to the residents of Baltimore City.
Yo, Rikki, thank you for enlightening us, and for those who probably have no idea of the depth of what this consent decree is about and how it ties and hinders the hands of officers wanting to do and not do. Because I remember when we talked and you was telling me about a gentleman on a motorcycle and he just stuck his tongue out and just looked at an officer, and he had no care in the world because he knew they weren't going to chase him, which, you know, we understand that. But even crimes, I mean, that's not so much of a crime, but things going on where the behavior of officers are known or sought out, and other officers know about it, and then their hands are tied. And this, as you said, this is really something that really needs to be addressed.
It's very disturbing. The young man on the bike, you know, as you mentioned, pulled his helmet up, blew a kiss at the officer. So one thing that I did as I've been not only campaigning, I did a couple of them 2 years ago, is that I usually do ride-alongs in different sectors and different districts throughout Baltimore City. I do it to see and understand. You know, I read a book years ago when I was in the MBA program, Seek to Understand Before Understood. So I wanted to ride with law enforcement to find out from their perspective some of the challenges that they engage and encounter as they're doing their jobs. I also wanted to see how the public reacted to officers. Was it welcoming? Was it more of a hostile environment? Because we always see what's on the media. And that's why I do appreciate what you do as a journalist, making sure that the message and the truth gets out there without sugarcoating it or anything else. But wanted to understand in the communities, and this was in Northwest Baltimore, out of the Northwest District, the community welcomed the officers when they showed up. It wasn't you know, get out of here or whatever the case may be. But in some cases, you had officers that literally said, you know what, you see this over here, this is a problem spot. I would love to go over there and just get out of my car and engage and have a conversation, but we're limited on what we can and cannot do. And she said what I did, and this is an officer, and out of respect for that officer and her privacy, I won't mention her full name, but what the patrol officer said was what I did last week was the guys were sitting on steps. I parked my car, I got out of the car with my bag of chips, and I went and sat on the steps. And if they was to do any activity of selling drugs while I was sitting on those steps, then I was going to intervene. And that's the type of officers we want in our communities and our neighborhoods. And the other part about that is, if you recall, when I was growing up, we knew the names of officers, and the officers knew the names of us. And so we need to get back to those days where officers was more of a community servant, I guess you would say, where
Yes.
they put more focuses on serving as well as protecting. And we don't have that now in Baltimore City. It's no more serving.
Yes.
It's only reacting. And we have to become
Reactive.
a city that is proactive versus reactive.
Yeah. Thank you, Rikki, for your views on that. And at this time, Rikki, I want to bring in some slides. And I'd like you to kind of elaborate on the events and some of the people that were in those slides, and only you can do that.
Sure, that is a slide that my wife took a photo of. It's when I actually filed my candidacy for mayor for Baltimore for 2020.
Oh, thank you. See, I wouldn't have known what you were doing there, but thank you. Looks like
this looks like Dunkin' Donuts. Okay, so this is where one of the businesses that I own and operate, which is actually the largest portfolio that we have, is Dunkin' Donuts.
Okay.
This is where I'm featured on the news. I believe that's Fox.
Yeah.
I'm featured on the news speaking on behalf of Dunkin' Donuts and the Peach Donut and flavor, which is a limited time offer that Dunkin' launched in April of this year.
Okay. Thank you. I hadn't seen the clip, but I'm glad you elaborated on, tell us what that was about. See, you're out and about?
Out and about with Dr. Little, president of the NAACP. One thing I continue to tell folks, look at a candidate and look at elected officials, not only their words, but their actions. If folks are showing up because it's campaign season, then it's something seriously wrong with that. This was a photo that we took a while back prior to my candidacy. It was a photo that we were just out in the community, making sure that we represented the folks. And I believe this was around housing. We were speaking on the housing issues that we have in Baltimore City.
Yes, and we know there are many of them. Thank you for sharing that, Rikki. See you out on the street?
Out on the street, and this is with former Mayor Sheila Dixon. This is actually the parade that we had not too long ago on Pennsylvania Avenue. And I believe collectively that in order to address the concerns and issues in Baltimore, regardless of your political views or party affiliation, we all have to have some get to the table, have some dialogue. And this is actually prior to the parade starting, where me and former Mayor Dixon was actually having a conversation about the need of unity within the communities.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you got a point there about that, and we all remember who Sheila Dixon was and her role in the city.
Yes.
So you're still moving around?
This is just out in the community, meeting individuals, shaking hands. I tell folks that I rarely shake hands. I'm more of a hugger, so I go out, hug, shake hands. But one thing that I do that I'm hoping many other elected officials and candidates do is, I remember going to an event that at that time it was, going to an event, Senator Larry Young was there, Senator Barbara Robinson was there, and one of the remarks was, for those that want to serve and represent, you don't leave any hands out. And so as many places that I go, I try to shake everyone's hand. I was at McDonald's one day, and I went behind the counter and shook all of their hands. I was at a event at casino, at the Horseshoe Casino the other day that we sponsored, and I made sure I took photos with those that set it up and helped clean up. So is making sure that we touch everyone's hand, because everyone is important and everyone counts. Every vote counts, and everyone's opinions and views count. So
those are all tax-paying citizens themselves, and you made them feel empowered by you showing up with your presence, and you came back to shake their hands, and many probably was, wow, Rikki Vaughn came and shook my hand. I'm just somebody that works behind the counter. But that's the point it's making. Everybody is important because there's a power in the ballot. People remember that.
Absolutely.
See,
this is me trying to look good for my wife. So I go to my this is at my barber shop. I actually patronize 2 in Baltimore City.
Okay.
Because it depends on what area I'm in, and as you know, we have restaurants outside of Maryland as well. So sometimes I'm traveling and can't always get to 1 or 2 of the barbers depending on their schedule, and both of them are outstanding. So this was just out there, and also I was, when I go places again, I shake hands, I talk to folks. So I was in the barbershop actually. We wound up having a good forum, I would call it, in the barbershop. And it was around recreation centers. I remember this photo very well. We were talking about the recreation centers and why did it take us so long to open up recreation centers on Saturdays. But again, from a business standpoint, I'm glad to see we opened up recreation centers on Saturdays. But what is the curriculum that we have in recreation centers on Saturdays? And so that has still not been addressed fully to my satisfaction, and to many others' satisfaction as well.
I'm glad you spoke about that, Rikki, because when I heard about it and when it was put on the table, I was wondering, why was it supposed to take place? I'm not sure now, don't mark me on this. It's supposed to take place after Labor Day. And I was wondering, why didn't this take place during the summer while these young people were out?
And I agree, and that's the challenge. And that's why I'm telling, we have to stop voting on popularity. And start voting individuals in office that, let's just be honest, that makes sense, that has strong platforms inside in the community. Not only did this open up after the summer, but even in the Oliver Association, they opened up the swimming pool. But the pool was only open for 3 days. So it opened up for 3 days, and we shut it down. So, again, look at that from a financial and a business perspective. We spent taxpayer dollars on going in, cleaning up the swimming pool and water. We already know we got water bill issues in Baltimore City like no other, where residents are losing their homes, but yet you got the Ritz-Carlton that can go by without paying water bills for 10 years and rack up $2.5 million. But yet we open it up for 3 days and we shut it down. Think about the impact it has on youth in that community that can't even really benefit from it. And think about money that we spent that we could have held, interest or whatever the case may be, reallocated it somewhere else. But we opened up a pool for 3 days just to show, just to take a photo in the newspaper or on TV to say I opened up a swimming pool.
Well, if I remember correctly, my back channels told me it was somewhere in the 7 figures to open up all those swimming pools and wrecks. So
I believe the average was 115,000.
Thank you for that.
Don't quote me on that, but I know it was a 6-figure number. But I believe when we looked at the report back in September, it was roughly, I think the lowest came in on the lower end was 107, and I think the highest end was like 114.
Okay. I see you're here with some iconic figures.
This is a photo, not only a photo, if I can only get about 10 seconds. This is a moment in my life I would never forget. I was honored to meet Vice President Joe Biden. He was very humble. I asked him, I said, Mr. Vice President, and I yelled out, soon to be president, can I have 5 seconds of your time?
Yes.
And he said, no, you can have 5 minutes of my time.
Nope.
And we just had a remarkable conversation. I introduced myself. I told him that, hey, if I can give you the 4 bullet points, from homeless to homeowner, high school dropout to PhD, minimum wage worker to 109 restaurants as a CEO and owner, got in trouble when I was 18 to the next mayor of Baltimore City. And I said, this is my first run, or my first run for mayor for public office. I'm just this nobody trying to represent everybody. And I said, do you have any words for me, any wisdom you can share? I said, I know you can't endorse me, but I would love for you to endorse me. He said, well, after listening to that, and he said, so an individual, and he said, what part of Baltimore are you from? I said, I'm born and raised in East Baltimore. He said, I like that. You said you're a nobody trying to represent everybody. He said, what I can tell you is run, run, run. Don't look back. And I said, well, I don't have that machine behind me like many other elected officials and some candidates. And he looked at me and said, so many of us didn't either. And I would always, I'm under 6 feet, remember that conversation and remember how humble and also emotional, how emotional he was. You can hear him talking about his passion for just serving. So yes. I love it. That's Vice President Joe Biden.
Yeah. Thank you for that backdrop. I mean, and you were able to tell him. I like how you only asked for a few minutes, and he said, "I'm going to give you more than you asked for." See, and
yes,
it's
sir.
quite a humble guy, really.
And this is actually just one of the photos. We actually took photos behind, inside as well. But if the conversation got so good, we were walking outside, and I just said, let's take one more picture before you get in your car.
Oh, okay. Well, even though I'm glad I got that one. Now, who is this lady with this little kid here?
That is my little troublemaker.
Oh, okay.
He is the ringleader in our house. He's the boss man. My mom and my aunt calls him Mr. President. And that is my lovely wife. She is I call warrior. She is the face of our company. She's the COO of our business. And ironically, we met a few years we've been together for 5 years, been married for 2 years. We've been together for 5 years. And prior to, my KFC days, I owned Church's Chicken. I owned the 26 locations in South Carolina. And ironically, after we met, we wound up purchasing the very first Church's Chicken she ever worked at.
Okay.
And we purchased the very first Dunkin' Donuts she ever worked at. And so she is the face of the company. She's really kind of transitioning into the CEO role as I'm campaigning and hopefully, or not hopefully, but as I transition into the next mayor of Baltimore.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
An activist for young women, especially young women of color.
Yes.
My wife is 25, and she is definitely invested in the community. She was actually we hired some more of the squeegee. I don't call them kids. Some of the squeegee young adults. And not only did she go out and we made sure we onboarded them and hired them, but she also got 2 of them re-enrolled in school, and she hired one of their mothers, who's an assistant manager at one of our restaurants.
You see, that is quite an inspiration, and that is, like you said, a role model for young black women to look at. Look at what this woman has done. Look at what she's doing in the community. Look at what the both of you guys are doing as a team. As they say, 2 is better than 1, and you guys are quite a duo.
I know that's right. Yeah, I could not be where I am it's ironic. When I met my wife, I believe at that time was at maybe 40, 48, 49, restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
And within the 5 years we've doubled, almost doubled that. So we've, I couldn't be where I am without her. She is not only is she the gatekeeper and the organizer in our business, but even home. You better not. She makes sure that one night a week I have to make sure I sit down and have dinner with her and our son. She makes sure that I keep her involved and up to date on everything that's going on because she's a strong supporter, and vice versa.
You know what? That's a great thing to be able to sit down and have a meeting of the minds and sit at the table together, slow it all down, and come together. And that's how has a great deal to do with how you got to where you are. You know,
Absolutely.
and it's keeping those values in place.
Yeah. This is, and I don't do a lot of the public endorsements and all of that because one, my endorsement probably means nothing anyway. I'm not an elected official or anything, but I always talk about how we have to look at someone's heart and someone's passion, especially if they want to become a servant or public servant or more of a servant leader. But this is an individual that I would strongly endorse and support. Gary Crum, who's running for the city council district seat in District 12, where I'm extremely passionate about because that's first of all, I was a volunteer at Oliver Recreation Center growing up, and I was part of the Oliver Association, and although I don't reside in the Oliver Association anymore, I sit on their Economic Development Board. And so I have a very, and unfortunately my brother was murdered a couple of years ago in this association, in this community as well, the same community we grew up in. So I'm very close to the community. I'm very passionate about the community. He started campaigning running for city council, but his work didn't start when he filed to run for city council. It started years ago when he was out mentoring the young men and young women, when he was knocking on doors, when he was feeding the homeless for Thanksgiving, when he was having meetings around Christmas trying to figure out how can we raise money and get donations to give kids Christmas gifts so on Christmas Day they won't wake up sad and so on. So I strongly support him. This is actually, we had a homicide last weekend over in the Oliver Association. So Gary, the association president over there, who is doing an excellent job on holding folks accountable, which is Earl Jones. We all went out and we were knocking on doors, getting email addresses so we can send to the current city councilman over there, which is Robert Stokes. Letting them know, like, hey, we got to get cameras, up in these communities. The bar that the homicide happened at, it should not have been open late, and it was. So this was us knocking on doors, rallying and gathering the community and getting the involvement from the neighbors out there.
Well, this gentleman, like you said, I like when you said that his heart was already into serving well before he decided to go on and want to be a delegate or get involved with the city council. That already tells you a great deal about who he is and his passion.
Well, the other part about that is the media wasn't out there, and he still was out there.
And he was out there doing what he was called to do. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's what I tell folks. There's a difference between a politician and a public servant.
Yes.
A politician shows up when cameras show up. A public servant shows up for the people regardless of who's watching and who's filming. And I would truly say that Gary is a public servant and not a politician. This, of course, is a... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm glad you made that distinction and elaborated on it because it makes a big difference. It really makes a big difference. As we can see, he was somebody who was out there when the cameras weren't rolling.
Yeah.
Here's another figure. We all know who he is. New York himself.
Yeah, this is Reverend Al Sharpton, a great, what I would say, motivational speaker, great man in general, someone who takes a lot of heat and criticism, but doesn't let that distract him from the movement. I had the honor of meeting him. I was speaking at an event earlier that day that he attended. And, he said, hey, I like what you had to say. Keep up the good work. And then that afternoon, I was at an event that he was speaking at. And so I went over to him and said, "Hey, I like what you had to say. Keep up the good work." Uh, but that's a photo with me and, of course, Reverend Al Sharp.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? Wasn't that something, how it came back around full circle, and then you were where he was, opposed to where he was where you were first time around? Yeah, thank
Yes,
you.
sir. He spoke.
Yeah.
I spoke at 8:30 that morning, and his event was at 10:30. And so I actually did not know. It just said the event that I was going to, his event, it just said guest speaker. And so I wasn't aware who the guest speaker was, but I
Right.
actually had a seat up front and was able to get with him after he spoke, and we laughed about it, and so it was a great day.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that with us, Rikki. You know, it means a lot for you to taking us through all of what you did and the timeline and the people you met, and especially the backdrop. It's always good to get the tied-in version of how it came about. It was more than just taking a picture, you know.
Yeah.
But Rikki, going forward from this point on now, because our time is running close, tell me, where are you going to be next publicly, where the viewing public, if people want to support you, come out here, what you have to say? I'm already hearing some things about where you're supposed to be, but I want you to tell us.
Absolutely. So I'll be. I know this weekend I'm over at the Palladium. That's on Saturday. I'm actually. I'll be at Morgan State next Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
But they can. I'll be at the Black Caucus. November, I believe that's the 14th to the 16th.
Okay.
But they can also my calendar, my schedule. They can sign up on rikkivaughn.com.
Okay.
They can sign up to get my the newsletter, to get my schedule.
Sure.
I typically email it out on a weekly basis. If any changes occur, my admin team goes and update it. But you know, any information about me is out there. I make it public. I believe our servant leaders need to be available and reachable.
Sure.
And so that's why I like to be very transparent on where I'm going to be at. Because again, if you serve the public, then you work for the public. And in business, I know my store managers do a schedule and the district managers approve it. And if I'm to be the mayor of Baltimore, I need to have my schedule out there so the constituents can approve it and also be able to reach me and connect with me if need be.
That's true. I agree with that, Rikki. Please, again, since you said you're going to be at the Palladium Saturday, because I plan to attend, what time will you be there, Rikki?
That's from 5 to 7 p.m.
5 to 7 p.m. Okay, because I heard to talk to Mr. Murphy. You know, he's the publisher with the National Black Unity News. He has a great deal to do with what we're doing here, and you know, conversing and editing and all that we do. And Rikki, thank you for your time. It's more than a pleasure. We don't
Thank
always
you.
have somebody like you on here, but please let me know when you come back on the Finance Hour. We'd like to hear about your progress going forward in 2020. So,
Absolutely. I'll be honored if you have me back, and definitely, that's powerful, and I appreciate what you do as well, because we need to understand how finance work, and that's something I've been an advocate about from an education standpoint, because we don't teach young adults about financial management until they're already in debt. We need to get to the middle school students, teach them how to properly write a check, how to save money, how to manage finances, because that's where it starts, and so, or that's where it should be starting. And so I appreciate what you do as well.
Oh, thank you, Rikki, and I really appreciate that, and you, myself, and the National Black Community News, and all the viewing public. I hope you wrote down notes as to what Rikki said and where he's going to be, and we're glad to have him on the National Black Community News and the Finance Hour. Rikki, enjoy the rest of your day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
You as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rikki.
Restoring leadership. As a Baltimore resident, he worked at McDonald's, a high school dropout at 16, father at the age of 17, and a convicted felon at age of 18. Today he is the CEO of several national brand restaurants in 8 states. Magna cum laude graduate from an HBCU honors graduate with his MBA, now a candidate for PhD. It has been a journey. He has a goal of serving others. At the age of 14, he was honored to serve as VP of the Baltimore City Youth Council under Mayor Kurt L. Schmoke, a member of the Oliver Association. In Baltimore, we are in need of aggressive, immediate actions to turn our city around. We do not need politicians who self-serving and not helping Baltimore. As a proactive servant of Baltimore, ready to address our city's disturbing homeless population, the safety of our schools and neighborhoods, engaging and investing in our youth, and building transparency in our criminal justice system and practices. As a mayoral candidate, he looks forward to hearing from voters and better understanding their thoughts, their ideas, and their concerns. He believes that we need a solutions-first attitude in our government. Using his business background to improve how government works for all, attract new businesses and opportunities for all, and restore the integrity of City Hall. Together, we win.
Thanks for watching our podcast. If you would like to participate in our future podcasts as a guest, or if you would like to promote your business or service, contact Wayne Randall at 443-726-6693. Also visit our website at www.yourfinanceinfo.com. This is a TNBUN production.